Okay, let's dive in. If you've ever found yourself drowning in YAML files, or maybe just lost track of all those kubectl commands needed just to see what's happening in your cluster,
Hmm.
well, you know the feeling. That feeling that there must be a better way, right? Maybe like a visual control tower for all the moving parts in Kubernetes, instead of trying to guide everything from the ground with shouted commands.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a common pain point. That sheer complexity can be overwhelming.
Exactly. And if you felt that, then today's deep dive is for you. We're talking about the Kubernetes dashboard. It's pitched as this tool that really changes how teams can interact with their clusters.
Hmm.
Kind of like the dashboard in your car,
Yeah.
giving you that immediate visual feedback, turning complex command line stuff into something more, well, clickable.
That's a great analogy. And it really gets to the heart of it. The dashboard, fundamentally, it's bridging that gap you mentioned between, raw kubectl power and a more intuitive, user-friendly control.
Making complex things feel a bit more accessible.
Precisely. It's a web-based GUI, a graphical user interface, right? Designed specifically for looking after your Kubernetes clusters. It lets you see what's going on with your pods, your deployments, services, nodes.
So actual visibility.
Actual visibility, yeah. And interaction, too. You can view things, sure, but also create new resources, update existing ones, even delete them, often without ever typing kubectl.
Okay, so let's really break this down today. We're going deep on the Kubernetes dashboard.
Yeah.
What exactly is it? Why is it so important, potentially, for anyone using Kubernetes? And crucially, how does it actually work behind the scenes?
Right, and I think what's fascinating is how it balances that ease of use with the underlying power of Kubernetes.
We definitely need to touch on its core features, like its visual interface charts, tables, forms, that kind of thing. How it lets you manage resources, like deploying an app or scaling something up or down.
And the monitoring aspect, definitely. Getting those real-time insights into cluster health, CPU, and memory usage.
Yes. And security, that RBAC integration sounds absolutely critical. We'll get into all of that. But maybe first, why isn't this just a nice to have? Why is it potentially indispensable for teams?
Well, look, the improved visibility is a huge part of it. It's not just seeing more, it's seeing it in context. How different resources connect, their live status, error logs, all pulled together.
Right. Instead of running 5 different commands and trying to piece it together in your head.
Exactly. Imagine you're debugging some tricky deployment issue. You might need to check pod health, look at resource consumption, maybe tail logs, and possibly across different namespaces.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Doing that with kubectl is possible, absolutely, but the dashboard gives you that aggregated, real-time visual story. It can seriously cut down troubleshooting time.
So streamlining common tasks, like scaling a deployment or just quickly checking logs without wrestling with command syntax.
Precisely. It makes those frequent operations much faster and, frankly, less error-prone for many people.
And I guess that leads to the accessibility point, right? It's not just for the Kubernetes gurus on the team.
Not at all. That's a key benefit. With role-based access control, RBAC, properly configured,
Which we'll definitely dig into later.
right, you can give, say, developers or QA engineers safe, limited access. They can see the status of their apps, check logs, maybe even scale their own test environments, but without having permissions to break anything critical.
That sounds like it could really help democratize things. Break down those silos where only the ops team can really see inside the cluster.
It absolutely can. It allows people with different levels of kubectl fluency to still interact meaningfully and safely with the cluster.
Okay, but is there a downside? Does relying on a GUI like this, maybe, discourage learning the underlying kubectl commands? Is it a crutch?
That's a really important question. It's that classic tension, isn't it? Convenience versus deep understanding. The dashboard is fantastic for abstracting complexity for common tasks. It boosts efficiency. But, and this is a big but, it doesn't replace the need for knowing kubectl, especially for more complex scenarios or deep troubleshooting.
So when the GUI doesn't tell you why something's broken.
Exactly. When you see an error icon on the dashboard, but the reason isn't obvious, that's when falling back to kubectl describe or kubectl logs with specific flags becomes absolutely essential. Knowing the fundamentals is still your superpower for the tricky stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a tool, not a replacement for understanding. Now, you mentioned it runs in the cluster. How does that work? It's not some external service we connect to.
No, typically not, and that's one of the neat architectural points. The dashboard itself is usually deployed as just another application, another workload running inside your Kubernetes cluster.
Huh. So it's a pod. like my applications.
Pretty much. It generally runs as a deployment with one or more pods, often in its own dedicated namespace, like Kubernetes Dashboard.
And running it internally like that, what are the advantages?
Well, first, it benefits from all the standard Kubernetes features: resilience, scalability, rolling updates, just like your own apps. Second, and maybe more importantly, it has direct authenticated access to the Kubernetes API server from within the cluster network.
Ah, okay. So how do I access it then from my browser?
Usually you'd use something like kubectl proxy or kubectl port forward. These commands create a secure tunnel from your local machine directly to the dashboard service running inside the cluster.
Gotcha. And then I authenticate somehow.
Yes, authentication is key. Often you'll use a bearer token. This token is associated with a Kubernetes service account, and that service account has specific RBAC permissions defining what the dashboard, and thus you, through the dashboard, is allowed to see and do.
So the dashboard itself doesn't have God mode access.
Absolutely not. It acts as the authenticated user. When you interact with the UI, say, you click Delete Pod, the dashboard makes an API call to the Kubernetes API server using your authenticated credentials via that token. If your associated service account has permission to delete pods in that namespace, the API server allows it. If not, it gets rejected.
And that's where the RBAC integration comes in. The dashboard UI literally won't show you buttons or resources you don't have permissions for.
Exactly. It dynamically adjusts the displayed information and available actions based on the permissions granted by the RBAC policies tied to your authentication token. It respects the security boundaries you've set up in Kubernetes.
That's clever.
Oh.
And what about the performance metrics? CPU, memory? Where does it get that?
Good question. It typically integrates with the Kubernetes metrics server, which needs to be running in your cluster. The dashboard queries the metrics server API to fetch those real-time resource consumption metrics for pods and nodes, and then displays them visually.
Okay, so it's a pod talking securely to the API server using credentials defined by RBAC and pulling metrics from the metrics server. That paints a pretty clear picture.
Yeah, it's quite an elegant setup, really, leveraging Kubernetes primitives to provide a management layer for Kubernetes itself.
Let's circle back to the practical side then. You mentioned troubleshooting earlier. Can you give a concrete example of how the dashboard helps day to day?
Sure. Imagine your development team just pushed a new version of a web service. They want to quickly verify if all the new pods spun up correctly.
Okay.
Instead of crafting a kubectl to get pods LAP, my web app command, they can just navigate to the deployment in the dashboard and instantly see the status, how many pods are ready, if any are crashing, maybe even glance at the recent event logs for that deployment.
Much faster, less typing.
Right. Or maybe there's a sudden traffic spike. Someone needs to scale the deployment from 3 replicas to 10. In the dashboard, it's often just finding the deployment, clicking scale, entering 10, and hitting apply.
Compared to kubectl scale deployment, my web app replica is 10.
Yeah, I can see the appeal, especially under pressure.
Exactly. Or viewing logs for a specific pod that seems stuck. Find the pod in the UI, click logs, and you've got them right there in your browser, often with options to stream them live. It just lowers the barrier to performing these common, essential tasks.
It really does sound like a user-friendly control center, making things more intuitive.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Making Kubernetes management and monitoring less daunting, more accessible, particularly for teams where not everyone lives and breathes kubectl all day.
So wrapping things up here, the Kubernetes dashboard clearly offers a significant simplification for managing complex clusters. We've seen its ease of use that improved visibility through a single pane of glass, real-time info, logs, resource links, and how it streamlines common management tasks like scaling or viewing logs.
And don't forget the accessibility factor through RBAC, allowing broader team involvement safely. Right. And architecturally, it's pretty neat, running as a pod, talking directly to the API server, secured by the cluster's own RBAC system. It's not some external magic box.
Precisely. It leverages the platform it manages.
Thinking back to that real-world impact, a team quickly checking pod health, scaling under load, viewing logs without deep command line dives. That directly translates to productivity, right?
Absolutely. Less friction, faster insights, quicker reactions, especially valuable in fast-paced development environments.
So we've covered the what, the why, and the how. But maybe a final thought to leave our listeners with.
Yeah, perhaps something to mull over. We've seen how powerful visual tools like the dashboard make complex tech like Kubernetes more accessible. It definitely lowers the barrier to entry for certain tasks. So the question becomes, in this world of increasingly sophisticated GUIs and abstractions, How much does really truly understanding the underlying command line fundamentals, the kubells, the APIs, still matter? Especially for long-term mastery, for advanced troubleshooting, for when the GUI doesn't have the answer, where's that balance?
That's a great question. The balance between convenient abstraction and foundational knowledge. Definitely something to think about. Perhaps it's time for you, the listener, to explore setting up the dashboard if you haven't, or just reflect on how visual tools are changing your own interactions with complex systems. So what does this all mean for you? It means powerful tools don't have to be intimidating, and sometimes, as we've seen today, a little visual help can make all the difference in a deep dive.